Telling the truth week in and week out. It's Monday Night Chaos. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to each and every one of you fine folks tuning in to Monday Night Chaos on a fabulous Monday, August the 17th. Putting a date stamp on it. That way it makes it seem, like official. Like that bullshit they do on The Daily Show. We're bringing that same air of class to Monday Night Chaos. And I thank you, each and every one of you, for dropping in and joining us because, like I said, each and every time you come, there's a lot of places you could be on a Monday night, and you're here with me, and that's a fabulous thing. So welcome. It's good to see each and every one of you. Before we get too far along, I want to do all the business and make sure that you know all the comings and goings of that is Yellkaos and so on. I hope that made sense, and if it didn't, we look forward to your comments in writing. In any event, I want to remind you that down below, there's all sorts of contact information where you can get a hold of me on the social media, be it on the Facebook or on Twitter or on the Nintendo MiiVerse. If you're one of those people, you can also find me on the Patreon if you're interested in that sort of thing. And if you're not, hey, no big deal, but we thank you anyway. And I also want to plug this because people say they have trouble getting a hold of me, whether it's on the Twitter or on Facebook. And some people have even sent direct messages right here to YouTube, and I don't recommend that. So if you need to get a hold of me for, you want me to work your birthday party or bookings, things like that, or questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, any sort of correspondence, please feel free to drop me a line, and you can find it down there at theyellkaosprogram@gmail.com. That's how you get a hold of me. So how's everybody? I hope you're doing well. I really do, because it's Monday, and sometimes Mondays don't turn out the way we hope they're going to. And then for a lot of people, they know who they are. It turns out exactly how they think it's going to turn out, and dragging ass and that whole thing. But that's just the way that some people operate. But however you're feeling and wherever you are, it's nice to see you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the program while I've got you here. So I know I said that I was going to talk about my feelings about the modern arcade and having to do with the use of the card scanning systems in arcades. And I don't know if this is not really a time where I want to talk about that, because I've got other things going on, spinning around in the brain, things that while I was preparing for the show, as a matter of fact, that just kind of flooded into my brain, and I wrote down some notes here, and as I do each and every week. But just some things that I've been wanting to talk about, and I guess we can pick up that arcade discussion later on, and because that could go anytime, because arcades are, a little sucky for quite some time. So maybe we could wait till arcades get better. I don't know. But I want to talk about something I've been doing lately. And I've been toying around with this idea because I've told you about this. I'm very much interested in working with that Periscope doodad. The Twitter offshoot that's not really clear on how it wants to work, and it's only a matter of time before it starts showing pornography, at least softcore pornography. I don't know what they plan to do about that, but that's none of my concern. Whatever happens, happens. And some weird shit goes on in parts of Oklahoma, I found out through Periscope. But not to say that weird shit doesn't go on also in Indiana and Ohio, but particularly in Oklahoma. And I didn't even know they had smartphones or the internet or like computers in Oklahoma. So that's impressive, just for the sake of mentioning the fact that people in Oklahoma are really, they're doing better than people in Missouri. We know that. They've had a much better last couple of years than the folks over in Missouri. So we can't give too much crap to the people in Oklahoma. And if you live over there in Oklahoma, one of those people that attends this Super BitCon or whatever, good for you people. You are probably very advanced among your class. But I want you to know that I've been playing some. I want to explain my mess actually back here. Please excuse the mess. I know you can see there's some stuff back there behind me. It's that time of every couple of years, Mrs. Yellkaos and myself, we have to break out parts of the collection and see what still works. Hopefully it all does. And so that's what this is all about. It's test week, which has the tendency to turn into test month. So it might be a little bit messy behind me for the preceding weeks. So please forgive me. But that's what brings me to our discussion about Periscope, actually, in that I've been playing games on the PlayStation 2. I know. And and like any system with lots and lots of software, there's lots and lots of games that are nothing more than banners for the studios that made them or the publishers that made them, just to remind you that they still make video games, good, bad, or indifferent. Lots and lots and lots and lots of indifferent. I can say that honestly. But playing through PlayStation 2 games, you'll find that a lot of PlayStation games especially are nothing more than leftover 3DO and Super Nintendo games. There's a lot of that. Especially with like, was it Arrow Assault and so on. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. What I do want to talk about is one of these times I got to figure out, I want to show you guys this, because until I get my Twitch rig going on, and let me talk about Twitch for a second, because I thought that was interesting. I was thinking about that this morning while I was getting ready for the show. People seem to be talking like Twitch is going to collapse tomorrow, and I don't really think that's the case. I know people don't like Twitch. I am not crazy about Twitch. My very good friend Ed T1138, though, has been coaching me on the ways to make Twitch work for you. There's certain software and a little bit of equipment involved, but once I get that squared away, you people will stop caring about Let's Plays by that time, so it won't really matter. But I'm going to try and make Periscope work in this aspect, because I don't know, it's unedited, it's raw, you know, which I think is something that I've tried my hardest throughout the years to make work for me and for you. Don't forget, I'm doing this for you. All of it. Well, a little bit's for me, you know. Like if I ever get an endorsement to a good tasting soft drink that doesn't, you know, give you kidney failure, I might take it, you know. So I'm doing that for myself. But overall, you know, I want to entertain you folks. And over on Periscope, I think I'm going to find a way to just, I don't know how it's going to go. It won't be necessarily a Let's Play. It's going to be me flipping through software that I really don't think has much of a chance and letting it prove itself to me. And we can take the journey together. So that's something that I'm working on. I would like to turn into like Periscope Week. So we don't know. We'll see. I don't know yet. Usually when you do things that are purely at a random draw, you get randomly drawn results. And that doesn't always work to your advantage when you're trying to, you know, have a good time. Some people forget that. That's something that happens on YouTube. People forget that we're here to have fun. We're here to have a good time. A lot of people want to fight and talk about all kinds of nonsense. Like, I don't know. I understand that there are people who call themselves warriors who are trying to shape our situation, our community in a way that is not conducive to fun, not conducive to community. So I implore you, stop giving those people any attention of any kind, because you have to understand. I know that, you see how I segued that in there? I just kind of moved right into the next thing. The hell, I don't use transitional material. I want you to know that those people are not worth your time. Those people are not actually people. Those are entertainers. Now, you could argue that what they're doing is not necessarily entertaining to you. Granted, I'm not going to take that away from you, but the fact remains, usually when you see these people on the internet cutting their videos and talking about whatever they feel is the cause that they need to champion, you'll notice it looks a lot like a professional wrestling promo, because that's exactly what it is. It looks a lot like a lot of that you know, stuff you see in the GOP candidate debates, you know, all this stuff that's conveniently placed for the sake of video, you know, all that sort of thing. So pay close attention to that before you give them any section of your life or any section of your time. I'm proud that I can say that calmly, because there's others who can't. But I want to say that calmly, and that's why it won't really register with anybody. It seems like I have to yell and pull my fucking hair out of my head just to make points like that, but I'm not going to do that. I've decided that I'm going to say that to you calmly. If you want these people to go away, stop paying attention. Just don't look. You can sing the song now if you'd like. But speaking of community, what's interesting is going on in our scene is, and I'm going to say it. I've been saying it over the years now, but I'm going to say it right now. It's finally becoming, we're coming around to becoming more of a community, because in the last few years, it's been very combative, especially on YouTube. And there's certain people who may or may not be watching the program tonight, who may or may not be amongst you, but they know who they are. And to keep this illusion up that any of us have anything to gain by burying each other is childish, and it's a waste of effort and energy. and has driven a lot of great people from this scene and from this community. I'm not sure to what degree. I'm not going to suggest that involvement in this scene, being involved in YouTube, the online gaming scene, I'm not going to suggest that it's driven people to their graves, but I don't know that for certain either. I've seen plenty of evidence that would support a theory of that nature and of that gravity, and that shit needs to stop. And that shit stops with something that was brought to my attention. I shouldn't say brought to my attention, but what I really noticed it with is a recent acquaintance of mine here on YouTube and around, Robert Santellan, and Robert and I apparently go to some of the same events, but we've never had a chance to really interface. But he leaves comments here on the program whenever he can, and he brought up to my attention, I guess he has meetups, or he works with game stores that have meetups, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because let's face it. I mean, I'm going to break it down for you before I try and make this seem like it's any bigger than it actually is, because it is. You know, nothing is ever as simple as it looks, unless it's you know, the GOP debate. Then that's exactly what it looks like. Fake. You can say the same thing for Democrats. I don't want to have that argument, but people getting together and, you know, commingling, but they're doing it at a game store typically, which is an advertisement for the game store. But on the other hand, the game store, and I see that could be a very powerful thing, and could save this community from itself if more game stores were like this, because not all of them are. A lot of game stores really come off as you're walking into a hermit's den, and if you touch one fucking thing, they're going to take a paring knife and cut one of the knuckles of your fingers off. You know, those guys. There's a shop, I'm not going to name names, but in Oceanside, California, that kind of reminds me of that. You know, it's like you're walking into a cavern of gray plastic. And that's not healthy for a community. But there are stores that I know that I've neglected over the years to bring this up, but it's kind of been happening over time, that are reaching out, and, you know, they're saying, hey, come into our stores and look what we have for sale. But it's creating a bedrock so that communities can grow. That's something that I think a lot of people miss, because the online gaming scene has had trouble retaining all enthusiastic people, because there's, you know, I guess I would express it that everything needs a place, if that makes any sense. The military has the Pentagon, for instance. You know, assholes have Washington. You know what I mean? Everything needs. I'm sorry about that. Everything needs an epicenter, at least, you know, ground zero. And as gamers, because our hobby exists kind of in virtual reality, in virtual space, it doesn't really exist. It only exists on your television. And even though you're sharing it with other people, it's not quite the same thing. It only really exists to you. And that makes it hard to have a solid foundation from which a community can sprout and continue to grow. You know, every patch of moss needs a stone to call home. That's incredibly important. And these entrepreneurs are reaching out, and I think that's a special thing. And I hope to see more of that, because that's I shouldn't say I've the way it's been explained to me by a number of people, chief among them, Mr. Brandon, you know, and Mr. Berman from 8-Bit Artillery, who's explained this to me, is that it's usually the format is a small convention. You know, it's like a convention, but it's small. And I don't see it that way. I really see it. It seems to form a function, from what I've seen and how this works, and this is a great thing. And this also I'll talk about the 3DS Street Pass groups in a second, because they're kind of a part of that. It gives sort of a communal sort of vibe, which is not to be confused with a tribe mentality. For those of you who don't know what I mean, the difference would be between going to, say, like a beatnik, and this might go over some people's heads, or it might fly right into somebody's wheelhouse, depending on what part of my demographic you're in. But this is more akin to a beatnik coffee house, you know, with poetry and music and, you know, people uniting for at least perceived general good, and being able to express themselves openly without fear of retribution, similar to what a church does. A church is kind of the same thing, but a church is actually more of a business. Churches make far more money than game stores and coffee houses. Believe you me. And you know, there's that, and a game store really provides that. And then there's, I was trying to think of the other example, but I kind of lost it because I got lost in beating on churches. I always do that. I take the low road, and that's where we get lost. But you know, but it's more like that of, you know, a beatnik coffee house where, you know, it's you know, people coming together and being able to express themselves, as opposed to a church or like an AA meeting, which is more people who are guilty about what it does that makes them them. And that also has a church influence, so I'm not going to get too far involved in that. But I believe it's a special thing. And while the conventions are interesting in their own way, and that's what's going to help, I hope, save the conventions from themselves. Because the conventions are becoming a little kind of self-absorbed and self-interested. And I think the smaller gatherings are going to help strengthen that. I think that's an important thing. It's very, very important and very powerful that we do that. And that's why I also wanted to bring up, which I brought up last week, the Nintendo 3DS, the Street Pass groups, like the people over in Street Pass Utah, Street Pass Arizona. Down here, as I said before, we have Street Pass San Diego, and up towards Los Angeles, Street Pass Orange County, and all that stuff. We're making excellent strides at bringing these communities together. Unfortunately, those communities really only work if you own a Nintendo 3DS. From what I understand, a lot of them reach out to other parts of the groups and say, come, you know, and they have Wii U's or Wii's or whatever set up for those people that don't have 3DSs. But, you know, it gives it sort of a very come as you are kind of vibe. And that's important. That's important. You don't want people to feel left out. You know, that goes against the concept of community. And that's what I mean when I say, you know, community versus tribalism. It's a matter of bringing people in and giving them a safe haven and in a place where they can enjoy these things and, you know, feel safe with other people. You know, hopefully not coddling them, but giving them an opportunity to interface. Whereas if you go into, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, if you go into, say, it'll be different than a beatnik coffee house and more like going to a sports bar. I was going to say a cop bar, but that's a little bit different. And we can explain that on a future episode of Monday Night Chaos. But it's like going into a sports bar, but not like a regular sports bar. I don't mean like you go in and there's banners and shit all over the place and Budweiser and it's green. I mean those bars, you'll find them in Northern California, for those of you who live in Northern California, that are steadfast. There are Raider bars and there are 49er bars. And you'll hear about violence, about somebody from the Raider bar went and spit on somebody from the 49ers bar, and then they went and bit the fuck out of each other in the parking lot of either one of these bars because they root for a different fucking millionaire or billionaire's fucking logo. It's ridiculous. That's tribalism, and that's what I'm trying to explain is different. And there's far too much of that. There's far too much. I cannot believe grown people fucking arguing over Sega versus Nintendo in the 21st century. It's ridiculous. It's insane. And these people are doing what they can to bring us all just a little bit closer. Because you realize in life, we're born alone, we sup alone, we die alone. So those little moments where we get to have friends and get to be together are very precious. And that's what makes up your experience and makes up your life. And I believe that they're doing a great work, and that's a special thing. I really do. Now I'm going to have a sip of water because my throat's getting a little dry. By the way, for those of you who are so inclined, I'm on the Facebook. If I haven't mentioned that 100,000 times already, I apologize, but I'm going to mention it again. Check it out, Yellkaos on Facebook. And for those of you that follow me on Facebook, I like to put up a lot of what I think are funny pictures. And I put up a picture of an Atari Jaguar from from SWAT Pro magazine. If you don't remember SWAT Pro magazine, you're not missing anything. But SWAT Pro magazine was kind of like just a tips and tricks magazine in the 90s. And there was a plug for, it was some catalog. Part of the thing was a catalog. And it was for the Atari Jaguar. And it spewed a whole bunch of bullshit about the Atari Jaguar. And it had cat-like controls. And somebody asked, what the hell does that mean? And I assumed maybe it just means you should prepare for lots of vomiting. You know, cat-like. But with that, it reminded me of the long history of disappointments from Atari. I won't call their consoles failures, because failure seems to imply a streak, whereas Atari were just consistently disappointing. And then I was watching, there's been some buzz going on about the Amiga CD32, which I remember reading. A friend of mine, my brother's best friend's uncle used to get all the import game magazines. And he had one, and there would be all these cut out catalog sections of these import games, and there'd be these dudes in like White Plains, New York, or Kenosha, Wisconsin, or what's that place? Kent, Washington. Places like that would order these import games, and for fee, mind you, would order these import games for you and send them directly to your house. And I started learning about the Amiga CD32, and I didn't know that that was part of the Commodore family. And when I found that out later on, it suddenly made a bunch of sense about that. But I had seen games for the Amiga, and it didn't seem worth the price to me at all. And now, having learned what I've learned about Amiga and Commodore and latter-day Atari, and when I say latter-day Atari, I mean just post-Warner Communications. I don't mean Infogrames and licensing Centipede to Denny's. That's not what I meant. What I meant was, but when the Tremels owned Atari and also working with Commodore, and Jack Tremell's work with Atari as well as with Commodore is interesting because, and I want to say this exactly the way I thought it is, Jack Tremell got to ruin two distinct sectors of the video game industry. He got to wreck Atari's reputation, and he was a part of the overblown, oversold Commodore line. Jack Tremell, if you can't make him famous for what he contributed to video games, which was a whole bunch of nothing, the only thing that you could really attribute was that he really attained the goal, and maybe not attained the goal, but definitely pushed the envelope in what is or is not acceptable in deceiving and disappointing the American consumer, the global consumer even. And few people can say that. There's not a lot of people who have worked in electronic entertainment that can say that. So that's, impressive nonetheless. I just thought that was interesting that Mr. Jack Tramiel, God, fuck that guy. Everything I read about that guy is, I wish that I could read that somebody kicked him in his balls at some point. I can't find anything. He's just one of those old guys that you want to kick in the balls, but he's dead now, so it'd be a lot of effort at this point. Maybe he was cremated too. So how do you kick ashes in the balls? It can be. I'm pretty sure it could be. You know what you could do? You could take some of that ash and have it turned into balls, and then kick the balls all day long, or a hacky sack or something. These are all things you could be doing on your summer vacation. But yeah. Would you believe that my friends go to comedy clubs? They don't watch this program. They don't come see me when I'm out live, but they go to comedy clubs. What a bunch of fucking assholes, right? I'm kidding. No, I'm serious. They're a bunch of fucking assholes. Something else I wanted to bring up. Something I wanted to talk about was there was a sexy YouTuber poll. Did you hear about this? There was a sexy YouTuber poll, and I was not included. Why is that? I've got the sexy stubble. I've got earrings. I've got those really broad, manly shoulders. I've got absolutely lovely, Kelly LeBrock type hair. What could you not find sexy about this package? And I looked, and I was not on the list, and I saw some of the most, what's the word I want to use? Lackluster specimens that I had ever seen. People that I know, and people that I know that should have been on the list and didn't make it. So, I saw the Alpha Omega. He put it on the Twitter about that, and I said to him, the only thing, and if you guys follow me on the Twitter, which you should, I said, this list must be bullshit. I know for goddamn sure that they weren't gauging on sexy voice, and that's why I wasn't included. So either I wasn't included because sexy voice wasn't included, or the second option, which is what most people would say, is gay. I know that's the cop-out easy way out, but whatever. That's what I can only assume, is that they were not gauging for voice, because a voice like this could make your mother abandon you and things like that. And other things. So that's just what I thought. And what else did I think? Also, I understand Midnight Defender says it looks like I cleaned the Sonic carcass. No, the Sonic carcass is in storage. He wasn't improving with age, so there he is. But I'm going to take some questions. If you guys want to, feel free to throw some questions at me for the rest of the program, because I think that's all that was on my mind. Yeah, because don't forget, check me out on the Twitter and the Facebook and all that stuff, because I'm funny on there, as I've said before. And also, don't forget, for those of you that have things you want me at, contact your local promoter or find me at theyellkaosprogram@gmail.com. And I'll get back to you and, all that sort of thing. I'm not dead. And here I am. No questions. You guys are all bastards. I figured of all the people that are in here tonight, there'd be like, just a flood of questions, or maybe I missed them while I was on that big long spiel. It's entirely possible. And if you're disappointed about that, I'm terribly sorry. But anyway, sorry, I'm just taking time to drink water. What else did I want to talk about? I guess we can talk about arcades then. Okay, we don't have to talk about arcades. Tyrannus Rex 721 says, what do you think about the NX rumor mill that has been in full force since E3? It's very, 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 very similar to the Project Cafe rumor mill that was running since what? Like summer of 2010, if not before that. This is just part of the usual cycle. You can only see this so many times before you start to recognize the patterns. Just like you can only see so many presidential candidates come up with the same promises time after time after time, and after a while, you've seen it. You realize that there's only so many tricks, which means that this must be a job. This must be a work. They're trying to influence you for personal gain. So. Robert Sanders wants to know what I think about the RE2 remake. Well, I expressed my thoughts on that last week. Go back to last week. Check out the fix from last week. I don't care who the team is. If anything that I found out in recent years is that you can't count a team out who was part of a bad game one time, or a questionable game, because publishers fuck that shit up too. That's a very complex relationship that most people don't understand. Unforgiven wants to know, have I been playing Splatoon? I have not. I have had other things to do. Like I said, I've been going through all these PlayStation games and doing all that stuff. Don't have any time for that, unfortunately. It looks like a great time, but I understand that the game won't even be complete. All the updates won't be finished for a few more months. So, I got plenty of time. SNES Mapper wants to know, have I completed all of the 3DS Street Pass puzzles? No, actually, and I've been trying. I do lots to try and keep those coin counts high and try and collect all those pieces. And I find that I just seem to keep coming across a lot of people that don't have enough pieces. They just, I have all the pieces they have, and fuck you, Yellkaos. It's like, oh, God damn it. Something fine, fuck you. I'm going to go fish. Emmanuel De Luna wants to know what my thoughts are on the F-Zeros on GBA. I was a pretty big fan of, was it Maximum Velocity, or I think it was called F-Zero Advance in Japan. I like that one. Music is okay. Once you settle into the groove, no complaints. But, You know, I always prefer the one on the Super Nintendo to those. And the GP Legend, I am not familiar with. I don't own. I'm terribly sorry. Protoman ZX Advent, or ZX Advent, excuse me, wants to know, what is my favorite arcade game? I wish I could narrow it down to just one. As I've said on this program before, arcade gaming is my first love, and I absolutely adore so many arcade games. I've always wanted, I wish I had the equipment to really take you guys around, and I'll figure it out one of these times, to go around to all the arcade games that I love. I try and share that stuff on my social media because it's hard to get a video going, because especially when you stumble across arcades in odd places, like a laundromat, things like that. It's hard to capture, you know, especially buildings with lots of machines. It's hard to capture that stuff because it's so noisy. So I try and find new ways to do that as best I can, and I'll have more to bring to you as soon as technology permits. Let me see here. The Media Dragoon wants to know, is this episode sponsored by the N64? No. My chest is sponsored by the N64. The fine people who are fueling the Nintendo 64 community and those that are working on home brews, God bless you people to do the home brews for the Nintendo 64. I understand it's not that much fun. Sponsoring my chest. So, just so you know, buy yourself a Nintendo 64. Please. Maxim Index wants to know, what do I think of Review Tech USA? I think that Review Tech USA is one of those guys who conveniently espouses his opinion from one side of gameplay footage. Nothing against him, but I feel that by doing that, he takes no risks, and by not showing his face, I don't know what he looks like. I don't care what he looks like. The fact remains, he's one of those people that I feel gets to comfortably espouse an opinion while being safely behind gameplay footage. That's how I feel about it. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's just the way things are. So, anyway, what was I talking about? Arcades? No? Is there any game series that you think should change genres because you think the games would be even better than they currently are? I have no idea what that means. Is there any game series that you should change genres? Well, that's not really up to me. I think that that's kind of an unhealthy frame of mind to think that a game series should change to accommodate you. That's like expecting a band that you like what they look like, but you don't like their sound, expecting them to accommodate their sound to what you want to hear. Fuck you and what you want to hear. You have to do what it is that you do, and you should gravitate towards stuff that you like. You have to understand that game series typically are just forms of marketing and advertising. You're attached to those characters because you've been marketed to do so. That's why. If you don't like a direction that a game series has taken, I recommend you move on. There's hundreds, if not thousands of others. Some better than others, obviously. But yeah, I don't know what else to tell you. Thinking in genres is really not healthy, also because genres have become a marketing device. And that's a really poor way of looking at video gaming. Again, and not to say that, you know, what you said wasn't valid, but if you want game series to suit you, you're going about this all wrong. You're really approaching this in a totally different way than it should be. That's like really going to see a movie based on who lit the goddamn thing, who was the key grip, you know, who was the best boy in this movie. That's a terrible reason to do anything. It's nitpicky, and it's not particularly helpful. And you'll find yourself just, you know, wishing for other things to come about, and that's not good either. You know, just go and look. Games are cheap, especially compared to how they used to be when I was a kid. Video games were like $75 when I was a kid, and that was in like 1992 money. There was a recession on, but it wasn't like, you know, that it was money. Let me tell you. Saint Illuminated entered. It says Review Tech has showed his face a lot of times, and people ask him to go back to gameplay footage. Well, there you are. You know, I have no comment. I mean, let the truth stand there. If that's what people said, you know, I don't want to ascribe quotes to people, but whatever. MV Allen wants to know about my days working in arcades. For those of you who don't know, I used to work for Sega Entertainment, the actual entertainment branch of Sega Incorporated. Before they became Sega Sammy, right before that, and I think so. And I worked in their branch called GameWorks Incorporated, which was an offshoot of Sega got together with some of the money people at DreamWorks Entertainment and decided to put together a venue-styled arcade. And I did that for a long time. And I could tell you stories about, I'm sure I've told stories on this program a number of times about young ladies throwing up in their drink. You want to hear about that? I don't want to hear about that. But there was an NFL Blitz machine, and it did have a spot to plug in your N64 memory card. I don't know if I told you that. So that's cool, right? Right? And if you've ever done those, is it Sega's Indy 500, where the cars move and you're in front of 4 big screens like they have at Dave & Buster's? I got to operate that. That was pretty cool. It's not as cool as it sounds. Not nearly as cool as it sounds. But, you know, I did it anyway. And then we had a mechanical bull, and that was not nearly as sexy as I thought it was going to be. Proto-Man ZX Advent wants to know my favorite movie. I don't know. For a time, it was Tim Burton's Beetlejuice, but now I don't know. There's a lot of movies in there. Sometimes it's one of the police academies. I don't know. It seems to kind of move around, at least to me. So, Uncle York says, if you had the money to buy one game franchise that's not been used, which one? Well, what would I do with a game franchise? I don't make video games. It's always interesting to me when game fans think they know more about making video games than the people who actually do make video games. Just like the wrestling fans who think they know more about wrestling and are smarter than the people actually doing the wrestling. Sometimes they are, not always. I don't know. I one that I'd love to see really get another go. I really wish Sony would put some goddamn money behind the return of Jet Moto, but based on Jet Moto 3, not so hot. But I would love to see a return of Jet Moto. I really would. I don't know if there's any money in making Jet Moto games. I think that's for them to decide. That's not for me to decide. But and I also don't know what I could do with Jet Moto to make it any better. So that's another misconception. I don't claim to know how to make a video game that would sell. So for me to make a video game would just be throwing money at, you know, I mean, I'm sure a handful of people would buy it, especially if it's on one of the major systems. But, you know, I'm sorry to, you know, kind of poo-poo the question, but I'm not the guy to ask. I don't know. And apparently Max Johnson has been playing the shit out of Raiden. Well, good on you, sir. That's not my favorite, though, of that type of game, that type of vertical shooter. If I were going to pick that kind of vertical shooter, I would have to say that I would lean towards Strikers, if you remember Strikers. Some people would say 1942 by Capcom, and 1942 is a little stiff, and I don't think it's, you know, a great example. It's a forerunner, definitely, of that style, but you know, I think that Strikers is a better example. Night Strikers 1945, great version of it on the Sony PlayStation, and on the Neo Geo MVS Strikers 1945 Plus. So be on the lookout for any of those when you're at your local thrift store or Chinese buffet. These places usually find those. Midnight Defender wants to know, what are some of my favorite metal album covers? My favorite metal. I don't really think about those as much as I thought. I do love artwork, though. I'm a big fan of that. And you wouldn't know it because many of the albums that I've been involved in, the artwork has been lackluster, you know. I think that an everlasting piece of artwork, you can see it behind me, is the album from the first, this is the cover from my band, the band I was in, Crepitus, from our first album. And I really like that album cover. That one was done by Ryan Colgan, our guitar player, and he did that. And you can see it on you can see it on some of my videos, actually. So if you scroll back and look for Crepitus songs, you'll find it. I'm trying to think of other metal album covers. A metal album cover that's always been interesting to me was the cover of Strapping Young Lad's self-titled album. The feather with all the blood around it, I always thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I wasn't sure what was trying to be. I think it was supposed to say that the pen is mightier than the sword, and you know, the quill pen, feather pen. I'm just guessing on that. And some of the other albums I've seen are so offensive that I love it. A record from a band called Gorgasm called Masticate to Dominate, which is horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And that's another one that just really sticks with me. I can't tell you which ones are my definite favorites, but I know the ones that I can't seem to forget. You know, similar to like a Dying Fetus's Grotesque Impalement. I don't know why that one sticks out. Immortal Sons of Northern Darkness, you know, a bunch of white men with big, bare, white chests, you know, and that whole thing. In fact, I think most of their albums had, you know, guys with big, bare, white chests. Yeah, that seemed to be kind of black metal, that wave of black metal in a nutshell, wasn't it? Blood Tearer wants to know metal bands to avoid at all costs. Metal bands to avoid at all costs. Well, bands that, I guess you mean the bands that I really don't like and say that don't waste your time. That's going to vary based on your feelings. There's a band called Five Finger Death Punch who has the same amount of validity and are as relevant as Disturbed in the 21st century. I didn't think people still listen to that. Of course, I don't understand why grown men still feel the need to put massive lifts on their pickup trucks, why grown men need to, you know, adults need to drive monster trucks. I don't understand that. So there's that band. I don't recommend that band at all. In that same breath, I guess, I don't recommend Disturbed. There's probably a lot of metal bands I'd say don't even fucking bother. And then there's some bands that I listen to because they are crap. Like, oh man, I'm trying to think. There was a band that really sucked, but I won't get rid of. Shit, I can't remember. If I remember, I'll tell you, because it was from the 80s. It was from like some Metal Massacre compilation by Metal Blade Records, and they were really stinky. But I keep it. Slayer? No. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pick on Slayer. They're old and they need all the help they can get. Because as you know, heavy metal does not have a 401k program. And I predict, that's something I want to talk about also before we wrap up the program. That's something that I want to predict, that you're going to see a lot more interviews and a lot more metal guys, because now they're getting into their late 50s. You know, the Metallica guys are in their 50s now, and they're going to start talking about the rigors of the road and not being able to do it and so on. Like, you know, I just foresee that's going to be the thing. Similarly to what you saw, the same thing that comes out of athletes a lot. There's usually very little sympathy towards the music business, but lots of sympathy towards athletes. I've never understood that. I really don't, because I don't know why we naturally boost athletes in this country, but we don't genuinely encourage creativity, and we wonder why everything's so fucking boring and why there's never anything on TV, and why people like you have to come here with 100,000 channels on TV and watch me week after week. Oh, well, I appreciate it. Folks, that's all my time. I thank you for coming out. I want to remind you to check down below and click all the links and all that stuff, because that's the best way to keep in contact with me. I'll remind you, don't believe in nothing.